Dr. Pereira.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Pereira, Director of the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center at Florida International University. Welcome to this webinar on Haiti, moving beyond the crisis and the U.S. responses. The center, LAC, as we call it at FIU, is very concerned about Haiti. It's part of our portfolio of research interests, as part of our portfolio of events. We've had a recent event on education in Haiti. We'll be conducting a Haitian Summer Institute this summer in person for the first time in 5 years, because it's been online for the last 4 years, and that's where we teach intermediate and beginning Creole, Haitian Creole. But I'd like to thank everyone involved with this panel, and especially my colleagues in the Caribbean Policy Consortium, Georges Fariol, all the members of the panel. And I'd like to turn things over to one of my colleagues in the Caribbean Policy Consortium, Ivalaw Griffith. Ivalaw Griffith has just published a book called Challenge Sovereignty, in which Haiti features prominently as the gravest security challenge in the hemisphere. And Ivalaw had been here as a dean of the Honors College and is now at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And he is also a member of Global Americans and, as I say, the Caribbean Policy Consortium. So I'd like to hand the mic over to Ivalaw, and I look forward to this very timely panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and good morning to everyone. I just wanted to offer my word of welcome on behalf of the Caribbean Policy Consortium. Look forward to an engaging conversation about a nation that is important to many of us, not only in this part of the world, but for the Black world, period. About a decade and a half ago, while I was serving as provost of City University of New York, York College, I inaugurated a lecture series called the Distinguished Scholars Lectures. And I invited to inaugurate that series one of Haiti's finest literary minds, Edwidge Danticat. I want to share with you one sentence from Edwidge Danticat that for me is an opportunity to frame the conversation we're having here today. This is what Edwidge Danticat said. I think Haiti is a place that suffers so much from neglect that people only want to hear about it when it's at its extreme. If Edwidge Danticat were writing this in 2024, most likely she would modify it to say that it may be at its extreme now, but it is also on the cusp of an opportunity to go beyond extreme to some normalcy. And I think the conversation today here is about the opportunities that Haiti has and the Western Hemisphere has, indeed the world has, to enable that Haiti moves from this extreme circumstance to a circumstance more wholesome for its peoples and for the peoples of this hemisphere. And I'm delighted that we're having this conversation led by one of the distinguished scholars of Haiti, someone who has navigated the policy world, the academic world, a guy called Georges Fariol. Long career, operating not only the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the Caribbean Policy Consortium, but served as vice presidents of not only the National Endowment for Democracy, but also the International Republican Institute, has testified before Congress, has operated on the academic side, the policy side, the advisory side, and so I'm delighted to invite George to help us navigate this conversation about going beyond the extreme. George?
Thank you very much, Ivalaw, for your actually valuable observation, including the notion of going from basically crisis to normalcy. Many of those watching this program know of your keen expertise in Caribbean security policy issues. In fact, Dr. Pereira referenced one of your latest books on this subject, which is directly relevant to today's discussion. Let me also thank Tony for the continued FIU partnership with the Caribbean Policy Consortium. Finally, I would also be remiss if I did not mention the efficient, if invisible hand working with Tony and others, Claudia Batista Tomada, the program manager at the Kimberly Green Center. We have much to cover this morning, so let me quickly move to the substance of the discussion. Today's discussion focuses not so much on the origins of the crisis. There have been a lot of already panels and discussions. Certainly there's a whole literature on the origins of the crisis, but rather on the key sectors, key actors that can play or hope to play a key role in shaping constructive, sustainable paths out of the crisis, sort of moving forward, looking over the horizon, if you will, and try to do this in less than 90 minutes. The discussion works from the premise that the transitional governance structure that was agreed to earlier in April, from which has emerged the Presidential Council, faces profound challenges. I don't think that's a particularly questionable line of argument, but at minimum, it provides a baseline framework that Haitian political and civil society actors can build from, and at the same time that the international community, key actors, including the United States, can provide targeted support for. So the central, maybe opening question, overall questions for this morning's discussion revolves around the prospects for the Presidential Council and its administrative structure that is still being created, what its chances are to meet its strategic goal. What is the strategic goal? Ultimately, is of transitioning to an elected government by February of 2026. This looks like a long period of time, but actually it's quite short when you think about the challenges that the country faces. We're going to begin the discussion with introductory observations from our panelists, and then open it up for further exchanges as well as questions from you, the audience, I think through the chat tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It is quite fitting to open the discussion with comments from Laurent Saint-Cyr, a leader in Haiti's private sector, but more importantly, in terms of today's discussion, a member of Haiti's newly created and installed Presidential Council. Let me actually just set the stage. Let me turn to him first, provide an opportunity for his comments, maybe take a few questions and move to the rest of the panelists. Laurent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, George. Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center and Caribbean Policy Consortium for organizing this webinar. The theme, Haiti, Moving Beyond the Crisis and U.S. Responses, is quite relevant at this particular moment. Foremost, Haitians seek viable pathways to establish sustainable political stability, economic prosperity, and social peace. The Presidential Council is a critical component of an interim governance framework laid out in the agreement of a peaceful and orderly transition signed by the many stakeholders on April 3rd of this year. If we look at Article 16 of the agreement, set out the broad outline of the perspective for the transformation of Haiti as follows, and I quote, "The mission of the Presidential Council consists of putting Haiti back on the path to dignity, democratic legitimacy, stability and sovereignty, and to ensure the proper functioning of state institutions," end of quote. It is certainly not our intention to fix all that has gone wrong in Haiti during the 21 months remaining in the transitional period. However, the following 5 strategic pillars of the transitions lays the ground for Haiti's long-term transformation. 1, national security. 2, economic recovery, infrastructure rehabilitation, food security and sanitation. 3, constitutional reform. 4, reinstatement of the rule of law and justice. And 5, democratic and transparent elections. Today, Haiti is at a crossroads. On the political and social front, successive governments have had great difficulties investing in education, healthcare, and critical infrastructures. Its internal contradictions have reached their boiling point. For too long, we have been looking overseas, expecting the international community to solve our problems. The collapse of the state and the crushing violence provides an opportunity to reset Haitian governance. Broadly, Haitians agree that we need to restore security and to undertake structural political and economic reforms, as well as organize democratic, free, and transparent elections. This is why the Presidential Council is working to implement a roadmap based on the 5 pillars of transitional governance. Additionally, the hurricane season will begin next month. Each of the more frequent, more devastating storms unleashed by climate change weaken us more. We lack the technical as well as the financial means to dig ourselves out of the catastrophes. I propose the following steps to break with the failure of the past and their consequences. From our international partners, we seek a paradigm shift in development cooperation to achieve our priority objectives. Paradoxically, billions of dollars spent over the past 20 years through development projects have left Haiti weaker. Many development cooperation choices have bypassed our national institutions, including the private sector, in favor of private international firms, international organizations, and NGOs that deepen the gap between Haitian citizens and their government. This model proved to be unsuccessful. Regarding restoring security, our primary concern is to learn from the mistake both Haiti and the international community made during the past 13 years of the UN stabilization mission to Haiti, MINUSTAH. We need to invest in adequate security services, including the National Police and the Armed Force, the National Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Council. We have to thank Caricom, the US, as well as Canada, Kenya, the UN, and other bilateral and multilateral partners for helping us get through this extremely difficult period. Still, we know that Haitians must drive the process of transforming our country. We just ask for more appropriate cooperation. In addition, in medium to long terms, Haiti's transformation drive must include a better economic strategy. We must undertake the necessary political and institutional reforms to attract direct national and foreign investments, create a massive number of jobs, invest in critical infrastructures, and provide quality basic services to our people, like education, healthcare, and sanitation. For example, we need to create a level playing field as we tackle corruption and smuggling along our border with Dominican Republic. We need to negotiate a trade agreement with our Dominican Republic neighbor based on reciprocity and a win-win approach. Moreover, international assistance in supporting economic development by contributing to creating jobs, increasing wealth, concurrently helping to grow the middle class, which is crucial. In that regard, the US government's Help and Hope laws, which allows duty-free entries of goods produced in Haiti to US markets, is a sustainable and excellent foreign aid model for Haiti. Consequently, the transitional government will launch the necessary reform to better position Haiti as a competitive country for friendshoring and nearshoring. It will be up to the next elected government to follow through the promise of transforming Haiti. I'm happy to contribute to this webinar, and I'm looking forward to the interesting exchanges that will take place. However, I have other engagements and I will leave early. May our time together be fruitful and our discussions productive. Thank you.
Laurent, thank you so much for your opening observations, critical reminders, particularly of the 5 strategic pillars of the Presidential Council. Before moving on, let me maybe ask 2 sort of specific questions for you. One, there's been some confusion, I think, over the last 24, 48 hours in social media posting and so forth about the nomination or the identification of a prime minister, let alone the creation of the National Security Council, which actually you mentioned in passing. Can you clarify those two points?
Sorry. So the first question is about the process for the prime minister, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it was agreed that after our nomination or installation, we should work towards nominating a prime minister. We took a lot of time because there was a lot of, besides trying to find the right profile, we had a lot of decree and arrêté that we should follow up to make sure that the actual government and can function and we could function. And one of the things is that we had to publish a decree so that we can be able to nominate the prime minister. So we received, to go back to the prime minister, we received about, if I remembered, a little bit more than 60 documents, but technically 22 were eligible to be prime minister. Some of them, it was just letters sent to propose prime ministers. So from there, we had a process that we discussed amongst the council, the members of the council, that was basically agreed on the accord to go get back to 5 candidates. So yesterday there was an interview, many interviews with each candidate, and from there the members, the voting members, chose what they think is the best profile to be prime minister.
But the nomination has not been confirmed.
We are in the process of writing the proper documents.
Okay. And then the National Security Council, that has not actually been formed yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
In 2020, they created the entity, but there was no structure. So
Right.
now we are looking at the decree, and we are working with experts to see how to better, or the best way to structure this entity so that it can serve its purpose.
If I can sort of take the prerogative of the moderator and sort of back out a little bit in a broader context of your observation, you made an interesting comment about the paradigm shift in the way the international donor community, international partners can ultimately help Haiti, and the historical reality of having bypassed Haitian institutions, both public and private, that clearly needs to be remedied. Let me sort of turn that question a little bit on its head and go very narrowly focused on, if you were to identify something that the Presidential Council ultimately needs now from its international partners, is it an issue of funding? Is it technical expertise? You made a reference to, for example, the upcoming hurricane season. Is it security? What is it that, if you were to focus on something, what is it you really need from international partners?
Listen, security would be the first thing, but I believe it's being addressed, even though it takes a lot of time. Until today, the multinational force is not yet functioning, and they did not come officially to start helping us with the gang issue. But my personal opinion, I think, and I discussed this with my colleagues, the first thing when we lack on communication. I believe if we need help from experts, is how to communicate and how to better communicate. Because with all due respect with my colleagues, we cannot continue having 7, 9 members going to the media and share information in ways that engage the council. We just decided to have like a porte-parole, but I believe that we need experts. I feel, and I know I can say it because, I'm not from the political arena. I come from the private sector, and I can take a step back and see how there's a lack of communication in this council, and people are just intervene in the media with different approach, different messages, that we really need experts to help us communicate.
Thank you. Let me take this opportunity to move to the rest of our panel discussions here, which is rich in expertise and experience. Let me take a few minutes just to introduce our other panelists, and in each of them we'll have an opportunity to provide some introductory remarks. I will begin here with Jacques Lumarque, rector of Haiti's principal institution of higher education, one of its principal institute of higher education, Quisquet University. He's previously served as the regional conference, president of the regional conference of rectors, presidents, and directors of universities in the Caribbean. Jacques, as many of you know, has a creative intellect, a mathematician by training, and also happens to be a close observer of Haiti's political scene. And we've asked him to provide an overview of sort of the key themes that frame Haiti's current political, social, and economic dynamics. We then take a closer look in this discussion to three key challenges. Many in our audience will probably come up with a longer list of challenges, but let's focus on three of them. Among challenges, among several that ultimately will frame the path out of this crisis. The first is from Monique Kleska, addressing the challenges of responding to the layers of violence that have already been mentioned several times so far this morning, notably gender violence, which has engulfed the country. Monique is eminently qualified to address this complex socio-political theme. She's an activist with many years of experience in the field of international development in Haiti, in Africa, and particularly advocacy for children and women's rights. She's also a member of the think tank Haiti Initiative, as well as a member of the Montana Agreement Monitoring Bureau. We then switch gears and shift to the important role of an engaged and dynamic Haitian diaspora, particularly in the United States, the roles that it plays or can play or hopes to play, centering both on addressing the specific needs in Haiti, but also aspiring perhaps to shape a dynamic U.S. policy response. This will be addressed by Ariel Dominique, who is the executive director of the Haitian American Foundation for Democracy, an institution really at the center of a network of diaspora organizations and related policy initiatives. She's also the co-founder of the Haitian Ladies Network. And last but not least, we will hear from Keith Mines, Vice President for Latin America at the U.S. Institute of Peace. And as I've learned from my own association with USIP, has a deep knowledge from on-the-ground experience with U.S. multinational efforts in Haiti over the past 30-some years, let alone experience in other hotspots around the world, including Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Colombia. He will conclude these opening presentations with a review of challenges, but also let's say there are opportunities of facing a sustainable U.S. and multilateral responses, including the actual deployment of the Kenyan MSS. Let me now turn the microphone over to Jacques for his opening comments, and then we'll move on to the other panelists. Jacques, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, George. Bonjour tout le monde. Honneur, respect pour tout le monde. Abe muspapam. Anuncio vobis, gaudio magnum. You know the formula. And then so avec great joy. And so, finally yesterday afternoon, after somewhat, what I could call an erratic process, we could see the smoke rising above the Villa d'Accueil. Caricom, former Prime Minister of Martelly in 2011, is our new Prime Minister. And in accordance with our Constitution, Mr. Kony is the head of the transitional government. But are we in the Constitution? Mr. Kony joins this complex and unusual arrangement of a government with 0 elected representatives, and in which the Prime Minister is, for the first time in our history, chosen by call for tenders. In so doing, we forget that the 1987 Constitution places us in a semi-parliamentary regime in which the prime minister responds first to the parliament, which is its real boss. There's no parliament today. And this is not the first time. This is not the first time that our political system has found itself in such an impasse. And to get out of it, what we do, we must also leave the Constitution and look outside our laws to find the answers. And during our, what a tumultuous history, we have experienced, several coup d'etat or insurrectional movements to overthrow a government. I've counted 26 in total, and approximately the same number of transitional governments. We also changed our constitution 22 times. And each time, it's in order to bend the law to a certain way of doing things. And as a result of this, we can say that after 220 years of independence, we have not succeeded in building a structured, organized, hierarchical, predictable state with solid and lasting institutions, institutions capable of withstanding the vagaries of changes of government. So what we do, we regularly place ourselves outside of our written rules and in political impasses from which neither the Constitution nor the law allows us to escape. What do we do then? A political agreement. I've counted more than 21 such agreements since the coup d'etat of 1990 to the present day. Washington Agreement, February 1992. After the coup d'etat, Governor's Island, July 92. New York Pact, July 93. Caribbean Convention Pact of Stability, 2005. El Rancho Agreement, March 2014. Kingdom Agreement, and Montana recently, and etc. And most of these agreements are, in fact, only what I could call an ad hoc arrangement, a sort of institutional tinkering, which most often has nothing to do with the Constitution. These arrangements involve a subgroup of actors that we used to call stakeholders. Stakeholders, because of what? Because they are in the forefront of the political scene. But these stakeholders, they are often disconnected from the social groups they are supposed to represent or from the population as a whole. Haitian society today faces a serious crisis of representation that only the practice of regular elections can help to resolve. And I mean elections where every vote counts. And this is what's happening today with this presidential council, as with other similar structures in the past, including the High Transitional Council chaired by Mrs. Maniga, and of which Mr. Laurent continues to be part, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right, Laurent? By the way, I noted that the decree published yesterday of May 27, establishing the new Presidential Council, formally, completely ignored the High Transitional Council. I think clarification is necessary on its existence. Do we still need it? Or on the role that the new team could entrust to it if we think that we need it? In any case, I think this is a minor difficulty as opposed to the gigantic challenges that await the council and that Laurent just mentioned earlier, and also the government, in their trajectory to lead us towards general elections in the next 18 to 20 months. Today, the Prime Minister Kony finds himself faced with a new reality, very different from what he experienced in 2011. It is true that the trauma of the 2010 earthquake cannot be neglected, but the tragedy we are experiencing today is of a different nature. What Haitians are experiencing today is not a fact of nature, but a man-made disaster, a human disaster in all its aspects, economic, political, social, humanitarian. Never, never indeed in the history of Haiti have we experienced over the last 5 years such an outburst of hatred, violence, rapes of women and children, mass murders, economic setbacks, social disruption, and also institutional disintegration. And today, and over the last 5 years, all of our misfortunes do not come from a bloodthirsty dictatorship as we used to have. They do not come either from a foreign occupying force, but they come from a new kind of domestic enemies. These 200 criminal gangs sowing death and desolation around them without discrimination and sometimes without awareness of what they are doing. We also know that this violence was in some way manufactured by part of our political and economic elites as consequences or corollaries of a certain way of doing politics, of a certain way of doing business. These actors are still on the stage, despite the sanctions. They are behind the stage, waiting for the day to come, with the determination to turn this transition to the advantage, but also the next elections. And the stakes of the upcoming battle are on the agenda of the council, as mentioned by Laurent, which is also that of the Prime Minister as chief of the government. This agenda is complex, dense, ambitious. It requires cohesion, discipline, rapid decision-making ability. I don't know if the council has these qualities. Look, in less than 2 years, there must restore order in the territory while strengthening our security forces. I mean not only the police, but also the army. Their main institutional tool for that is the National Security Council, in charge of piloting the international security assistance according to Resolution 2699 of the UN Security Council. This NSC already exists. It has been created by Jovenel Moïse through a decree in 2021. It is supposed to be chaired by the president and he by the council. And it includes the commander-in-chief of the army. While in parallel, we have the Conseil National de la Police Supérieure, the higher council of the national police, who is chaired by the Prime Minister himself. 2 issues of potential problem. First, we may not need both. I mean, the NSC and the CSPN. And the CSPN should disappear in front of the NSC, which has a broader mandate. Second, the activation, since it already exists formally, legally, the activation of the NSC will force the council and the government to give a clear answer on the role of the army, despite the reluctance of the international community to deal with the Haitian army. In addition, the council must also organize a national conference that the entire political class has been demanding for more than 30 years, but that no one has been able to make happen. They must also adopt a new constitution and do it before the general elections. They must stop, and not only stop, but also reverse the humanitarian disaster, which affects already nearly 50% of the population. They have to also to assist almost 400,000 displaced people to find a proper housing, rehabilitate our prisons, and get our courts back up and running. They must help the economy restore its productive capacity in every sector. And above all, they must organize general elections for all of our representatives and transfer power to the newly elected officials no later than February 7, 2026. Taking into account that our electoral register today is obsolete and that approximately 54% of voters are located in the departments most affected by insecurity, where nobody can vote. That means the West Department, including Port-au-Prince, with 41% of the registered voters, and Artibonite with 13%. And so 54% of voters risking not to be able to vote. These objectives of the agenda are, according to me, are beyond the government's capabilities, not only in terms of human resources, but also in terms of financial resources. Maybe it's time to think about a new connection with two forces that our governments have not always been able to exploit intelligently and optimally. I mean, the diaspora and the international community. I think I would stop here, not to get into the agenda and the consideration that Ariel and Monique and Kate would have to bring to the table. I prefer to stop here and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Jackie. You certainly provided some very specific constitutional, in some ways, the issue of the machinery and the challenges that the Presidential Council faces, as well as the broader political concern. But you ended on a sort of positive note, looking a little bit over the horizon in terms of what specifically other actors in the diaspora and international partners can play. Before moving on to Monique, let me actually try to ask you, or maybe you and Laurent, to clarify an issue. So is the Prime Minister the interim Prime Minister is Caricom, or is that choice not actually been confirmed?
Laurent?
There was a vote yesterday, so there was a consensus, let's say, on Caricom, and the Secretary General of the presidency is writing the document so that it can be published.
Okay.
This is what I know now. Okay.
Okay.
While I'm talking to you.
Okay. So in process.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Jackie. Let me, since you mentioned all of the names, let me move on quickly to Monique and her initial observations. Monique, the microphone's yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour. First of all, I want to say thank you for the invitation to participate. These different institutions got together and invited me, so it's a true honor. Thank you. Now, in terms of human rights, the theme that I have to deal with, human rights, including women's rights, are really the backdrop of all functioning societies, including democracies. And I say all functioning societies because democracy is one of the types of functioning democracies. And their massive denial is at the basis of the current crisis in Haiti and of a lot of other crises in Haiti, but we're focusing on this crisis in Haiti. And the promise of the respect of the human rights and even the actual fulfillment of the human rights will be a key element in responding to the challenge of violence, including gender violence that is endemic in Haiti, even without a crisis, in the immediate, short, and long term. So I'll come to the details afterwards, but that will be my introduction. Human rights are the backdrop of the crisis, and we must fulfill them in order to get out of this crisis. So thank you.
Thank you, Monique. You certainly are brief and to the point. Thank you. Let me then move to Ariel Dominique, and the important role that the Haitian diaspora can play. Ariel.
Thank you, George. I'm going to try to be, I don't think I'm going to be as brief as Monique. So anyway, thank you for the introduction, and thank you FIU's Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center and a Caribbean Policy Consortium for inviting me today. As the Executive Director of the Haitian American Foundation for Democracy, it's an honor to speak alongside such an esteemed panel of Haitian scholars and experts, particularly my fellow Haitian panelists for whom I have tremendous respect. They are contributing against all odds every day to advancing Haiti's cause in their respective sectors. It's a pleasure to see you all again. We are meeting today at an inflection point in Haitian history. As Jackie has mentioned and the others have mentioned, the catastrophic numbers speak for themselves. Hundreds of thousands displaced, villages burned, kidnappings and rape to an extent we have not seen before, and a capital taken over by gangs. Haiti is indeed at its extreme, its population having experienced profound trauma, including, as Monique mentioned, extreme gender violence. On the other hand, there is also a new government, 9-member presidential council, and a newly appointed prime minister as of yesterday, Dr. Caricom. Yes, hopefully, despite the profound challenges, we are also in a moment of opportunity where we can perhaps move away from crisis and do as Mr. Sincere stated, bring back Haiti to democracy and dignity. A Haiti on the road to work for all, not just a few, where there are, as Jackie mentioned, solid institutions. Against all odds, perhaps a paradigm shift. Against this backdrop, the question to me is how can the diaspora be better engaged to ensure that we change trajectory? Today, I will attempt to make some recommendations on how this can happen constructively in a moment where Haiti absolutely needs all its sons and daughters. This is an important question, as we all know that not only has there been a series of brain drains from Haiti throughout history, but specifically more recently with the hundreds of thousands who have fled the country, police officers, middle management, and so many who could have been constructive participants in rebuilding efforts today. In thinking about how to answer this question, I thought to share an example of diaspora engagement by discussing what HAVD has been doing over the past years. So since our inception, we understood that the diaspora was to play a crucial role in Haitian affairs. In our efforts to create smart structures and mechanism of engagement, we teamed up with partners in the US, such as the Kellogg Foundation, diaspora organizations, and stakeholders in Haiti, including Quisqueya University, to discuss ways that the diaspora could build structures, gain power, and have a stronger voice to influence US policy towards Haiti and be impactful in Haitian affairs. We administered a survey within the community to inform our recommendations. Despite the diaspora's great strides in increasing organization, we recognize still that there's a gap to be filled for more organized, powerful, and effective engagement. So we aim to build these structures in the coming years. Parallel to that, HAVD began intensive conversation with stakeholders from civil society actors like the Montana Accord, politicians and private sector actors, not only to better understand the situation in Haiti, but to bring Haitian expert voices to the diaspora. Through these numerous conversations, we realized that the crux of the issue was a governance issue, leading to extreme insecurity and the humanitarian crisis we see today. We also understood that the formula of a one-man show was not going to yield any results. Thus, we, alongside Haiti's allies, advocated for a Haitian solution to the crisis and a political consensus. So for 2 years, we spoke to various actors, built bridges for dialogue, And when Prime Minister Henry was unable to return, we facilitated discussion between stakeholders to reach the political consensus we had been advocating for. Ambassador Gaspar and Havdi board member accompanied Secretary Blinken in Jamaica. Since we had already built relationships and trust with many of the actors on the ground, we were able to co-sign the first proposition to the Caricom and support Ambassador Gaspar in his efforts to bring about the political consensus that we have today. As imperfect and fragile as it is a step towards stabilization. This is a clear example of diaspora engagement in the process, and really, I believe, a first of its kind, if I'm not mistaken. So in our conversations and involvement, we did not represent the diaspora, but we ensured that barriers impeding diaspora direct involvement in Haitians' governance were removed. As a result, we have seen many diaspora organizations support the candidacy of their members for Prime Minister, such as Dr. Carol Birot, a well-known figure in the Haitian American diaspora, and supported Dr. Kony, the support that we've seen from many Haitian diaspora organizations. Again, this demonstrates that we are part of the conversation and ready and willing to be involved. So moving forward, I believe there are many important roles that the diaspora can play, not only as advocates to the US government to ensure that the US is engaging constructively in the process with Haitians at the center of decision-making, including the assistance to the National Police, but also as a watchdog to ensure that the CP and the governance structure is transparent, void of corruption, and truly committed to its very ambitious objectives. So we understand that diaspora roles will need to be filled, not only in the organe de contrôle, but in the Electoral Council. So we must quickly build a mechanism to ensure that these roles are filled transparently. There is also a need for technical support and expertise at all levels, whether in communication, as Mr. Sessia mentioned, expertise and support in rebuilding the justice system or enhancing the security apparatus. We have many retirees, including police and military retirees in the US who can lend a hand. So we also need to strengthen civil society organizations who have been severely weakened, but still, as we have seen, at the forefront of the fight for better Haiti, to ensure they continue to play their role as watchdogs. So in the short term, diaspora involvement can take many forms: advocacy, watchdog roles, directly in the government at all levels, support to the current government, and strengthening civil society. However, for long-term, impactful involvement, the diaspora must be strong wherever they are. They must build structures for a coordinated voice and for greater influence. And we need to continue building bridges with Haitian partners on the ground. For this also, the diaspora must be continuously connected, informed about the complexities and nuances in Haiti, and again, build structures and mechanisms for integration and involvement. And also, when the time is right for financial investment. So it's going to be a difficult process, but it's a one day at a time situation. So thank you for now, and hoping for questions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. I note particularly in your conclusion the specific both strengths as well as almost obligations leading to strengthening of advocacy roles being played as watchdogs, but also the notion of building bridges. Obviously, this raises the question of how to coordinate all of these different initiatives, and I'm sure we'll get to that a little later. Let's conclude with Keith Mines, who we've given him the task of trying to pull together some of the various strands dealing with both U.S. policy as international engagement in Haiti, particularly on the security side. Maybe before moving to Keith, maybe there's a question from Laurent.
No, sorry, it's not a question. I really have to leave now, okay? It's very unfortunate I won't be able to hear Keith, but if you share the recording with me, I will learn from the rest of the webinar. But again, thank you, everyone. I learned a lot from Jackie, Monique, Ariel, and I believe there's a lot to learn. So I'm going to contact them in the next few days because I think there are resources to help me, but to help the council. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me, and it was a great discussion.
Thank you, Laurent. And a note to Dr. Pereira, we already have achieved some results here in terms of the connections and the follow-up. Thank you, Laurent. Thank you so much for your time, and best wishes.
Everyone. Okay, bye.
Am I on? Okay.
Keith, there you are.
Thank you. Look, this has really been tremendous so far, and I think having Laurent's intervention up front was really, really helpful. That vision for what needs to happen, I think, couldn't have been better. So really strong first step, actually, on this communication front, which we all agree, I think, is really critical. And George, really good job. I think we're exactly on time, which is unusual in a webinar of this type. What I wanted to do as a framing for my section was look at the international accompaniment of Haiti over the long term. And I think it's important to see this as an accompaniment, not some of the more pejorative and unhelpful terms that have been used to describe the relationship, which frankly, in some ways, in the criticism of the international relationship with Haiti, I think is giving people an excuse to not do anything. So I hope the framing is something that we can kind of get to a good point and then sustain it. So I would put it in these terms, that at one extreme of the international relationship with Haiti is the Haitian solution. This sounds very respectable, reasonable, safe. In this scenario, the international community takes an extreme hands-off approach and sort of allows Haiti to be Haiti. The problem with this scenario is that given our joint history and the interlockedness of our two countries and societies, the nature of the problem set is never really truly a Haitian solution. Guns still flow into Haiti from the United States, while the security forces are prohibited from buying needed weaponry from the United States. The cream of Haitian society will filter out of the country based on U.S. immigration policy. Haitian industry will rise or fall based very directly on U.S. tariff and trade policy and other decisions. And the Haitian political system will respond to U.S. signaling, even if it's inadvertent. So there's real limits, I think, to the Haitian solution. I think it's not, it's just not a place where a totally hands-off approach is productive. So at the other extreme is the international takeover of Haiti. And this often comes as a result of frustration with the Haitian solution or with the pace of the Haitian solution, or in the midst of a political or natural disaster. This is where the international community, generally with the U.S. in the lead, reaches a level of frustration or mistrust that things are going to work out and sends in a large effort to help manage the country itself. Sometimes this has been in the form of a peacekeeping force, sometimes simply in the form of working around the established government, which is really endemic, I think, in cooperation with Haiti, which is deemed too slow or corrupt or incompetent to manage things and requires an alternative. But there's a third option that I propose we're in the throes of and could possibly get right this time, and that is a respectful accompaniment, It's not entirely new and untried. I think if you look at the last 30 years, there's been periods where this has been sort of the norm. Second Proval administration may be the best example. Under this scenario, a Haitian-owned political process yields good enough leadership, and the international community accompanies the development of Haitian governing and security institutions from a respectful but effective distance. Assistance is well coordinated among donors. Advisors and mentors are placed in key institutions, but out of the limelight. Material assistance is provided to key ministries and institutions, and various models for developing, for example, a justice system are provided for debate and deployment. Key inputs, as we're reminded earlier by Ariel from the diaspora. There's been, again, great examples of this. The various U.S. police, Haitian American police officers that have served alongside the HNP as mentors and advisors, I think is one of the easiest examples. One model for this could be the Colombia example. The U.S. was very involved in helping Colombia to restore order to what was quickly becoming an ungoverned, not an ungoverned state, but it was certainly a place with many, many ungoverned territories. The U.S. had very high levels of assistance, but it was very present, but not visible. There were some active units of the U.S. military that were involved. So there was ways, I think, that can be developed such that it is in all the right places, but not something that robs the nationalism card from the established government. So what would it take for this to happen? Well, the first thing, of course, is to get the gangs out of the way so that any governance can be effective across the country. That is absolutely, as I think everyone has mentioned, the key thing that has to happen now. The MSS is hopefully incoming. That's a very small force. It is not something that is going to be able to do that mission alone. It probably is a little too small in my view, but at whatever size it comes in, it's still not going to be the main force. The main force is always going to be the Haitian security forces. And I think the framing earlier by Jackie and others about the army is an important debate that needs to happen, and there needs to be some kind of an interim solution that allows for a heavier Haitian force to be formed that can do the real work that's ahead, and that's a whole nother issue, but something that really needs to, I think, to start with. And there needs to be a real strong donor coordination mechanism, especially on security, but for everything else as well. The second thing is strengthening governance, and we've talked a bit about that. Laurent, I think, and the council has a very clear sense for how that could be done. There's a real resource question, starting with the transitional presidential council itself, and then moving on as we start looking more and more at the development of ministries, again, for advisors, for material assistance, and other things. There's a third thing that I would point to. There's some key short-term mechanisms that will need additional support and attention. And there's a couple of these that are really the linchpin, I think, to everything else. So they need to be looked at, I think, carefully. One is corruption. There's probably a need for something like this, the SIG model that was used in Guatemala. Communications, we've talked about. And the other one that would shore up all of this, that would probably be part of any viable gang strategy, is just a large employment program where there's a way to peel off the young people from the gangs. So there's, I think, some key things that are kind of first among equals when one looks at the things ahead. All of this, of course, needs to be key to the election. The election is really the prize in all of this. If that can go well, then all of these short-term and temporary things that are going to always be a little bit questioned in terms of their legitimacy, those start to go in a different direction. There's also probably some short-term and longer-term changes in the Haitian system that are going to be needed. And I think even just getting through this interim period to the election, there's a few constitutional issues that obviously need to be addressed. The justice system is going to have to function, at least on an interim basis, if any of the security things are going to get better. And then the whole debate between the security and the periphery, this would really be a good time, I think, to get that in a better place in this temporary period, so that when the other things roll out, then that becomes something that's already embedded in how business is done. All of this is going to take a lot of patience. It's going to take a lot of trust. It's going to have to be very long-term. There's no short-term solutions. And then the key thing, and I point to the webinar that we did last week, it was very good on listening to local voices in considering all of this, and particularly in considering development challenges. There's something written into the governing arrangement now about dialogues. I think that's really going to be key to engage in a dialogue process, maybe not the life-stopping national dialogue that some are envisioning, but in the midst of all these temporary and in some ways opaque solutions, to have a dialogue system where communities have a way to communicate with the government is really going to be critical. The U.S. needs to take its own advice from the Global Fragility Act and really key all of its solutions to local voices and local actors, and then the new Haitian government, of course, as well, to do likewise and have built into its process as a way to listen to the populace. I hope that's helpful, and I think we're lining up fairly well in many of these solutions. I know there's probably some disagreements, but I feel very comfortable with everything that's been said so far, and actually quite motivated by it all. I think there's a very good vision here that's being laid out. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Keith. You towards the end of your observations, you made a passing reference to the constitutional and the elections. There's already been a few questions in the Q&A function here of this panel. So let me actually take one of them and broaden and ask as many of the panelists as possible to comment. And let me rephrase the question a little bit that was posed and generalize it, which is the question of constitutional reform. The history of Haiti, as Jacques referenced, is in fact that the political process hasn't really hasn't really followed the procedures of the Constitution. Therefore, there have been these 20 special political agreements that Jacques referenced. As a result, as we move towards an electoral process, isn't trying to reform the Constitution, let alone actually coming up with even maybe potentially a new one. I don't think that's the issue, but at least reforming it, is that actually a challenge that's going to undermine the process even more than it already is, as fragile as it is? Or is there something actually fundamental that needs to be addressed before moving to the electoral process? Maybe anyone who wants to address that. Jacques raised the issue, but any of the panelists, please go ahead.
Well, maybe George.
Jacques, yeah.
Yeah. You know, the 1987 Constitution is really a very complex, sometimes ambiguous and contradictory. That's why it's very difficult to apply. And if you want to strictly apply it also, it can be very costly for our public finances in terms of the different local entities that it requires. We know that this constitution has lasted the longest among the 22 past constitutions that we have had. But it's not because it is perfect, because it has been bolted by its writers. That means it leaves you little margin of manner to change it. We have developed, because of the dictatorship, a reflex of anti-presidentialism. And after having such a strong executive, we wanted that shifting to democracy means a lesser president. And even in the discussion within the council, I don't know if you noticed that, there was a big battle around how you designate your president. And then sometimes they prefer to use the word of coordinator, because they are afraid that once one of the 7 members is elected president, he becomes a real president with the full force of a traditional executive. And so this culture of anti-presidentialism has led us to elaborate a constitution that makes the president the weakest piece of the executive. The president is not the chief of the government. He has been elected, and while the prime minister has been nominated and selected by the parliament. And after less than 15 years of analysis, discussion, studies, we think that this constitution deserves some kind of changes. What is the best moment to do it? I used to say this crisis, because it gives so much power to the parliament that I don't see any parliamentary voluntarily accept to make the modification that would restitute more power to the executive, and that would give them less power. That's what I call hierarchy. And so the best moment to change it is today, like when we have this question. But we have this contradiction to manage, because it's not only a technical matter, even if technically there are so many works already done by the Parliamentary Commission of Géritaldieu, by Jovenel Moïse and the Commission, by University. Technically, there are many elements for decision, but it's not technical, it's a political process. And the main issue is the issue of trust. Do we trust this council to lead a constitution in favor of what we need as fundamental changes? I think the most important issue is create the stress from our elite, political elites, and establish the pathway for that. And if we don't change the constitution before the elections, the only way to do it is according to the long process of amendment that it includes. And so that's an opportunity. But the cost may be high in terms of relegating the electoral agenda to the second plan, which is the most important thing today, right now. This is the kind of contradiction we have to live with today.
You point out something that I think maybe many in our audience already know, which is the technical work in terms of revising the Constitution has already been made. This is not that this has to be then created at this point, but you highlight the fact that this is a political decision. What would be the timetable? I mean, within the 21 months that we have, the Constitution reform process would have to occur and be completed starting at the end of this year into the early part of 2025, I assume, right? Correct?
Yeah. Maybe there's a shortcut, Joel. I was thinking about it, and some members of the council have started discussing it with me. They have in the agenda this national conference that you have been wanting to do for 20, 30 years. Everybody demanding for this, but we couldn't do it. Why? If you think of a constitution, a new constitution does three things. It gives you the vision of the society you want to create, to establish. And it also the fundamental basis of human rights, of the rights of the citizen, the relationship with the citizen and the government. And finally, it gives you the architecture of the government, of the governance, the relationship between the different powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary. And so these are fundamental changes for a society. Why don't we take the shortcut and make the national conference based on the new constitution? The changes that we want to bring into the political environment would be through the channel of the national conference, and the result would be the new constitution. That would be a shortcut. Mm-hmm. And by so doing, we save time, and we create conditions that we can have a new constitution before engaging into the electoral process.
Let me thank you. Let me shift gears a little bit here and come back to Monique. Human rights as a backdrop to the crisis. Several of the panelists, as well as Laurent, have already mentioned the significance, the importance of security, dealing with the gangs and so forth. Is addressing the human rights question. This is an unfair and maybe oversimplistic question. Is this related to political strategies, a legal strategy, a security strategy, an economic development strategy? Keith mentioned in passing sort of a jobs initiative. What are we talking about in sort of simple terms? Monique.
Thank you so very much for this. Well, you know, human rights colors everything. And I wanted just to give a little example. Recently, last week, there was a broadcast of Brut Media, a documentary, and there was a little boy of 10 in a displaced center. And he was asked if he was afraid. And he actually responded and said, in the country that I live in, I don't have the right to be afraid. I want to go to school. I want to learn things. And to me, that was extremely significant in that here you have a little boy who is actually expressing his rights and demanding that his rights be respected. So I think that is something that is extremely significant. Now, in responding to the challenges, and I think if we look at the April 3rd Accord, if one reads it, unfortunately, the English translation has not been published yet. It should be out in a couple of days, but it throughout the introduction in particular, it talks about human rights. And I think that is significant. Now, it talks about the end of violence. It talks about protection of citizens' rights. But the presence of the gangs is in everything. So the first thing that really must be fulfilled in terms of rights is providing security for all of us. And I think we are all aware of that. Now, being more specific in terms of what I believe should be done, I think the first thing in terms of that, the accord itself, because it is clear in its preamble about human rights, I think the publication of it is something that will be important in terms of publicly acknowledgement, a human rights agenda to the coming 2 years. But I think the public acknowledgement in another manner by the Presidential Council, a kind of mea culpa. One may think that it doesn't make sense, but I think in terms of a political move would be something that is important. It's beginning because some of the councillors in little remarks are saying they recognize that, but I think there needs to be a stronger statement by the Presidential Council, which is the acknowledgement that human rights of Haitians are being violated and that this accord and this council will be about fulfilling these human rights. That is one aspect, the public acknowledgement of it. Another aspect is the actual actions of the government, meaning that the security aspect, the humanitarian aspect, because there are about 500,000 people who are displaced. A lot of them are in, I can't say the word camps because they are not really camps. They have taken over different places, public schools, government ministries, etc. But fulfilling those needs, the humanitarian agenda, is also another aspect that I think is extremely important in the short term. Now, a third thing I may say is that one of the bases, at least I know of the Montana Accord, and this one, the 3rd of April Accord also, was the massive protest against violations of human rights. We can't neglect the fact that this crisis, a lot of it, the protest movement that came, that is a manifestation of the people's voices saying, we do not want this kind of government anymore. We do not want corruption anymore. We do not want massive violations again of our rights. This is very clearly the people saying that there is a social justice agenda, which should be a response to a lot of what has been said, a lot of these government violations, etc. And people in the streets, as well as in the various documents that have come about, have talked about access to healthcare. That is a massive human rights violation. In normal times, the access to healthcare was about 50%, which means half of the population did not have access to healthcare, to quality education, to decent living conditions. Now, moving on to the justice agenda. I think Keith Mines talked about the justice agenda. There's an important justice agenda. Wherever you go, people talk about that. But wait a minute, the fact that there is even this whole aspect of Wakale citizens doing their own justice when they're catching supposedly gang members, that is a need. They are expressing a need for justice. And it may be that they're expressing it in their popular manner, but it is a reflection of, listen, we need justice in Haiti. We are not getting it in the regular manner. So now we are doing it on our own. It is not saying it is good. It is recognizing that it is a manner for people expressing the need for justice in this aspect. And this needs to be done with transparency in everything that will be carried out in terms of the justice agenda. Now, if I talk about the gender-based violence aspect, regardless of what has happened with the gangs, gender-based violence is endemic in Haiti. It is a structural problem that is linked with the patriarchy, with the violent system that we have. However, it has been now, the gangs have used girls and women's bodies really as a weapon of war against us. And I think there are responses that can be done. There have been countries, particularly DRC, where this is a huge issue, where they have set up a kind of economic trust fund for the economic empowerment of victims. And I believe this is something that has to be done in Haiti. It can no longer be done in the little tiny way that it has been done. We need really major donors to contribute to a kind of economic trust fund. Because remember, last year alone in 2023, there were maybe 5,500 reported rapes of women and girls. And I'm talking about reported, which means that the number unreported may be a whole lot more. So we're talking about on a massive scale. Another thing that should be done also is really support for women's organizations of Haiti. And again, I will talk about the Haitian solution. It is not, and it has never been, and I'm saying this particularly for Mr. Keith Mines, it has never been about we do not want anybody to come and help us to support us. It has been that we must be reinforced, the ideas must come from us. That's what it was, because remember, the Montana Accord is the one that came up with the word Haitian solution. So I don't want it to be changed in that it does not mean what we meant for it to be. And in this, I will say that there are hundreds of Haitian women's organizations throughout the countryside, from Waname to Kai to Jérémy. And whatever solution must not be that BNU comes with an office for gender-based violence, or that the US comes with an office for gender-based violence, or that the Kenya comes with an office for gender-based violence. We have gender-based violence women's organizations who are working on that. And this is what needs to be supported and reinforced. A couple of other things before I conclude. Now, sorry, I'm near an airport. We don't have, in Haiti, in comparison to a lot of other countries, we don't have a registry that says these are the cases of gender-based violence in Haiti. So every data set that you have really cannot be trusted. It is an approximation. But you have countries, for example, like Mali, that have just set up a major national system where you can know what are the gender-based violence violations in the country. In other countries, it is done in humanitarian settings, but we need for it to be done throughout the country. And I think that is something that is important. Now, to conclude, I will say that we also need massive prevention services. It may sound ridiculous, but 10-year-old girls, it is brutal, but 10-year-old girls are being gang raped. 10-year-old girls are getting pregnant from the rapes that they are victims of. We need prevention. It is not to say that if they had had prevention services, perhaps the gangs would not rape them. But as a matter of principle, they need to know what their rights are, and they need to know what to do in society and they need to know what their bodies are and how they can defend themselves. So I think it is something that is extremely important. So in conclusion, may I say that political power by women also, again, it is a massive violation that when you have 52% of the population that is female, that you only have 3%. In the last parliament in Haiti, there was 3% female representation. It is not only insane, it is, you know, I don't know what the word that I can use for that. 3% representation for 52% women. So in conclusion, I would say in terms of human rights, it boils down to humanity, it boils down to dignity, it boils down to really not being indifferent, it boils down to not being disdainful, and it boils down to knowing that equality is what we need if we want to go the democratic route. And this is what I have to say in terms of human rights, which are also women's rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. You've actually put a lot on the table here, and we only have a few minutes left. Let me actually take some of the elements of your presentation and pose a question to Ariel about the role of the diaspora, particularly in addressing the core of what you just mentioned in considerable detail, which is addressing Haiti's social justice agenda, and then also in tandem with that, addressing the issue of gender violence. Are there specific actions, specific institutions, or specific things that the diaspora can actually do to address that in coordination with Haitian civil society organizations? Ariel.
Thank you, Joy, for the question. I think that the first thing I want to say is that I want to stress the importance of what Monique said when she first said that we have to center Haitian voices in our conversation and decision-making processes. They should lead the way. Secondly, I think it's very important also to acknowledge over and over the trauma that the population has been victim of, and particularly women. So having said that, I think for the diaspora, as I've mentioned before, I think one of the key ingredients, for involvement and support is for them to be informed. So not only they need to to understand the facts and the data, the numbers, and to know which organizations, the women and other, are at the forefront of the social justice fight. So that's one of the roles that HAVD would like to continue taking, is bringing these voices, these Haitian voices, to ensure that the diaspora understands what is happening, understands how to get involved, to make sure that they support women's organizations such as SOFA, Caricom, and others from Yola, Folk Yola. And I mean, that's what it is. They need to be informed. They need to know who is at the forefront of this fight, and they need to be able to have mechanism of support, of funding for these civil society organizations on the ground that are doing the work on a daily basis.
Thank you, Ariel. We have only a few minutes left, so let me actually just pick and choose here a little bit. First, there was another question from the audience, which raised an interesting question, maybe Keith or anyone else on the panel might want to address, which is the question of gangs. Everyone has mentioned the importance of gangs, but are gangs alludes to particular socioeconomic and political sort of institutional makeup. Are we talking about actually militias? What are we actually talking about here in the context of the Haitian current crisis? Keith, maybe you want to start with that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I saw that. I really disagree with the premise there that the gangs have become militias. I think there's a real danger in giving these gangs more than they deserve. You look at the Colombian case. The Colombian case was against a well-established insurgency that went all the way back to the 60s. They had a political agenda. They drifted into criminal activity, but the FARC was always a political actor, and that was fundamental to who they were. In Somalia, there were militias. that acted just as brutally as we're seeing in Haiti, but they were real militias because they were based on ethnic and tribal groupings. So they came with their own political agenda, and that was, whether legitimate or not, it was something that was built into who they were. The term used in the question was transnational criminal organizations. Haitian criminal gangs are not really international. They have some international touches, but they're not really moving around the hemisphere like in Mexico and Ecuador. So I think we're left with criminal organizations. They really are criminals. They brutalize to take over territory. Monique described very, very vividly, as we all know, how brutal and how vicious they are. But they're acting as criminals. They have criminal intentions, and I think giving them anything more than that is really dangerous. And I don't think it's something that most Haitians would agree with or allow for. So I would stick to criminal organizations, and they should be treated that way.
Thank you, Keith. Any other comments from anyone else on the panel on this question? No. We only have about 5 minutes left, so let me actually turn this fascinating and rich interaction into what amounts to a closeout question, which is the following, which is, if you look at key events or key issues, what are those events or issues that our audience listening to this program, what should they be watching for over the next 60 to 90 days? Is it a specific action from the Presidential Council? Is it something else coming in from the international community? What specific event or issue should our audience be watching for? Why don't we start with Keith?
Yeah, thanks. Just to close out, I think I would go back to the security issue only because it's the most immediate, and frankly, everything else is going to depend on whether security is reestablished. So I would say the key issue to look for is changing the correlation of forces between the gangs and the good guys. And that comes with the entry of the multinational security force and everything that will come with that, which will really have to include a rapid buildup of Haitian National Police and Army under a really, really comprehensive gang strategy that's owned by the Transitional Council and its National Security Council or High Council of the HNP. And Jackie points out there's two kind of competing visions for councils. There's really only room for one. So I agree that's got to be one or the other, but we certainly don't want two competing councils. But that would be, I would say the key thing to look for and the key thing to support in the short term so that all the other things can start to get done. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Ariel?
Well, definitely, I think that without question, the security issue is one that we should look out for to see if there's improvements on that front. But I would say that now a cabinet needs to be formed, and we want to make sure that it's done in a transparent manner. And for us in the diaspora, I think having very competent members in these different cabinet positions and director general position is going to be a key indicator of if this is going to be successful or not according to our standards. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Ariel. Monique?
Thank you. I totally agree with Ariel. That was my number one. The new cabinet will be, is it the same old, or is it rupture or change? But I think also the launch of the national conference, and because to me, it has always been linked to the constitutional reform that Jackie talked about. We always saw it as the entry point for the constitutional reform. And I think I refer to Section 10 of the April 3rd Accord, which really describes the national conference. And I think that is extremely important, as well as the formation of the Electoral Council, which is Section 11 of the April 3rd Accord, and the organe de contrôle, which is the checks and balances, which is Section 5. So I think we really need to look at the accord, these different sections that describe that, and that is going to tell us how fast they want to move and how it's going. Is it the same old, or what? Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. Highlighting the National Conference, the Electoral Council, and the Organe de Contrôle, the Monitoring Council. These are important tasks. Jackie, last word.
Yes, I agree with all of that. But one single detail that we may forget. The country is run today not by two-headed executives, as many demanded, but by a 10-headed executive outside the Constitution and without any control mechanism. In the absence of the parliament, the government action control body, what we call the OCAG, made up of representatives of the diaspora and the 10 departments, is called upon to play this role. It was provided for in the agreement of September 11, 2021 with Ariel, and also in the agreement of December, in the December agreement, but was never put in place. And we can understand that. We can understand
In
the
Montana also.
reluctance. We can understand the reluctance of the executive to create itself a structure which controls it and which limits its power. And the same thing is likely to happen with this concept. I think its implementation requires numerous consultation and can therefore take time. So you need to start working on it straight away. It is a mechanism that can promote transparency and therefore limit corruptions and waste of public resources.
Thank you, Jackie. I think the general sort of theme that I draw from this rich panel discussion is continuing engagement and creativity from different sources, different institutions, both international and particularly on the Haitian side. And arguably, I think also a sense that things are possible. Things actually are possible rather than the often sort of negative and skeptical perspective about Haiti. We unfortunately have run out of our time. Clearly, this is a continuing story. I want to take this opportunity to thank both FIU and CPC in this sort of continued partnership. I gather that this program will be available both on the FIU website at some point as well as on the CPC website for those of you who want to follow up with individual questions and themes, as already has been mentioned by several of the panelists. But thank you so much for this for the interaction, and stay tuned. Haiti is an important story. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, George. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.